This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gold.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. I am Old Gingerface. I'm here with you. Thank you for being here. I truly appreciate it. Thank you for all the rating and reviewing that's going on. I appreciate that too. You can see I have my authentic Gould sweatshirt on. My uncle, great guy, funny guy. Last time I saw him, he said, and I think he's newer to like social media and like scrolling, and he said, yeah, I had a bunch of drinks and I was on the internet and I saw this ad, so I ordered these Gould sweatshirts for like a bunch of the guys in the family. And he's like, I didn't know what, I've seen those a bunch of times. I've never bought one. And he's like, I didn't know what to put for the established, so I just put since 1776. I'm like, yeah, hell yeah, man, I'll take it. Thank you. So just a little review. The printing's a little bit see-through. It's it's what you would expect from, probably came from China or somewhere, but this is those ads, they are real. My uncle has proved it. So thank you, Uncle Jay. I love you. I got my Gould sweatshirt on here for the show. Guys, everything's been going great with the podcast, and I really appreciate you guys sharing and spreading the word. I think word of mouth is the best because I seem to get the most, the right people find the show through hearing it from other people. So if you think somebody would like the show, just share it. That would be awesome. I do that with podcasts that I listen to. I'll share it with other people and show it to them. Especially, I always appreciate when someone does it for me because I'm always looking for more podcasts to listen to. I spend a lot of time in a cruiser, a lot of time, doing details and stuff like that. So I have time and I can easily burn through them. So just share it with your friends and family. If you know somebody who could be a good guest, please let me know. Always looking to feed the beast and get more people on here. Kind of ebbs and flows. Is that the expression? Anyways, it goes up and down with how many guests I get, and the problem is I always need guests. So if you could come on the show, that'd be great. I know there's a lot of people. I know there's a lot of coppers, state troopers, city cops, federal agents. I know you guys all listen, chiefs of police, and I know you all have stories. So step up to the plate. Come on, you've been listening. You like the stories? Contribute some of your stories. It's fun. Everybody always has a fun time, even if you're a little bit nervous. That goes away in like 2 or 3 minutes, and we're just two cops having a fun conversation. So that's my plug for the show, guys. Today's guest, very excited for. It's been a while since we've had a federal agent on, and I've been hearing a lot from cops that come on the show that they're now suggesting that you become a federal agent and don't become a cop, which I'll have to ask our guest about, probably having to do with leadership and the cultural climate. But this gentleman did 21 years, retired from DEA, special agent in charge of Omaha Field Division. He did 8 years in the U.S. Army. He was an infantry officer, rank of captain. He served on the DEA Foreign Deployed Advisory Support Team, conducting narcotics counterterrorism in Afghanistan. Without further ado, let me bring on the great Justin King. Justin!
Hey, Steve. How you doing?
I'm doing well, sir. It's great to have you here. What do you think about this advice we're getting from veteran coppers are saying you should try to go federal?
Well, I can only speak to it from the federal side, but I will say that being a DEA agent was one of the best decisions I ever made. It was wonderful. I got to go all over the world, and it depends on where you're at, I think, and there is some moving involved and relocating, but it is a phenomenal job, and there's not a lot of jobs where somebody can tell you, go find a drug trafficker and start an investigation and just see where it leads. And then next thing you know, it could be international, or you could be going across, the country working cases. So it is a phenomenal job. And, but I can only speak to it from my side. I talked to a lot of my friends who patrol officers, state troopers, and they have a wonderful career as well. But I think a career in law enforcement, no matter what, it's a noble profession. It provides a service, and I think we're blessed to be able to do it.
Absolutely, totally agree. Yeah, I did notice that federal agents in general seem to have a much longer leash to make your cases. Like you can, which also comes with a lot of pressure, because then, a lot of the guys that come on here that were special agents were they kind of put their ass on the line a few times, kind of make a judgment call, like going somewhere with somebody that's kind of, oh my gosh, they look back on it now and they go, man, that was crazy to have done that. But just, to get the case, to get some work done,
100%. I mean, it's funny, I used to say this, as I rose up through the ranks, and I tell people I promoted too soon because the real fun stuff was just being the agent, being the first line supervisor. But, I kicked a lot of doors when I was an agent when I was a supervisor, I was like, we maybe need to think about that. And then I became like an ASAC and, wanted to think a little bit more. So, perspective changes as you go up there and you realize the risk, but when you're young and you'll go and, this job took me all over the world. I worked in probably 10 different countries, and it's a really, really neat and cool job. But you're right. That gray area, it's there and you gotta live in it sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Isn't it funny when you become a supervisor, all of a sudden you start over analyzing all the decisions like, oh boy, I don't know. Cause you're on the hook. You know what I mean? You're responsible for these guys.
Yes.
That always happens. I did notice, like on LinkedIn, I will get a lot of like just pop up like, hey, they're hiring special agents or they're hiring whatever. LinkedIn's always trying to hook you up or see if you're interested in something else. I did notice that the feds do have a hard age limit on becoming a federal agent. I thought that was like ageism. I thought you couldn't do that technically.
So it's really complicated, but when I was coming on and throughout most all of my career, it was 37. You had to be in the academy by the time you were 37, and that has to do with some of the policies and things that go all the way back to like the 80s. But there have been waivers recently. There's also been something that's really unique that we've been doing is hiring agents or people to come in as agents who are with other agencies. And so other federal agencies are coming over lateral. And for years, we would ask people and they're like, yeah, I'll do it, but I don't want to downgrade. I don't want to step down and everything. So now there's actually, I think it may have closed today or tomorrow, there's been a big hiring push right now for that, trying to bring more people in. In law enforcement across the board, we're all trying to find ways to recruit more people in because we just cannot keep the numbers up. And it's just we're all trying, and that's a challenge right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like kind of similar to other things I've seen, like some states and cities try to have an age limit, but I have heard through the grapevine from other people that just go ahead and apply. And if you push back, a lot of times they'll just let you in, which is interesting. So they it's almost like they prefer this. They're going to put it out there like this. But if it's kind of a weird way to get into an agency, be like, well, I'll get an attorney. And then they're like, all right, you can come in. It's like, yikes. That's not how you want to start academy,
I was at the Office of Training for about a year, and I saw a couple of waivers come in, and they weren't just a year or two. They were like multiple years. People were older. And I was like, God bless you for being in your 40s going through the academy. And, and I was 33 when I went through. But you see that, and you're exactly right.
Yeah, I figured that was the case. But yeah, I get it. It's a young man's job. We always say that, and there's no other job like police work that will make you feel old quick.
Oh, you're 100% right. And with my current job with the National Command Staff College, that's one of the things we teach. We do leadership, but we also talk wellness. And, we talk about how over time this job, starts to change you and how you see things. And, we always equate it to like soldiers. They deploy, they come back, they reset, they refit, they go back. Whereas in law enforcement, you really never turn it off, right? I mean, over time that builds up, and it'll age you.
Absolutely, yeah. And where I work in small town USA in Western Massachusetts, and a lot of the chiefs are working chiefs, like 1-star chiefs. So they're in the office, but they'll shag calls as well, and they have a lot of other responsibilities besides patrol, and then they're also backing people up or going on calls, and they're 40s, 50s, 60s. That's getting up there to tussle with somebody, or you know what I mean? Come out of the office cold and go handle something.
Yeah. And what we find is that the people don't get that reset. And over time, you just start to think that's normal. It's just normal to be so busy and doing that. And, those people are, they're doing it every day. They've got that experience. And it's like, what would the world be like without them, and their training. And a lot of times, people are learning from them, and they're like, okay, that's the normal. And we're understaffed, underpaid and overtaxed.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one thing to do it like in the policing environment I'm in, which I consider pretty good. Then I've said it before in the podcast, but past guest David Carrasquillo, he worked for Englewood he was a Marine. Then he worked for Englewood, which is very busy, as we all know, in California. And he said that's what got to him. That's what started to affect his mental status. Was it never ended? Like he was doing gang stuff. So he would come home for supper, like he was a Marine, but when he came home, he was home. And now he's working as a gang cop in a gang-infested city, and he'd sit down for dinner with his family or wake up in the morning and have coffee, and he's just thinking about the job and who's going to try to kill him, or the cases he has going on. It never goes away. You never get that reprieve.
Oh, I know exactly what that's like. And I was one of those, I would always say, being a drug investigator wasn't a hard job. You had to work hard at it. You had to really do your homework and try to learn as much about your target as you could. And I would just, I'd get up 2 a.m, go drive by a house just to see, make sure, I was always, it was always game on. And the thing was, it was fun. And so as you're doing it, you're constantly just, and it was always fun when I became a newer supervisor. I got a young agent or a new task force officer that was new to the game, and just watched them just be like a young bird dog, just out looking all the time. And the stories, just funny. I mean, guys I'd be like, come in the next day and, I'd look at the guys and, did you go to sleep last night? And he goes, oh, boss, yeah, a little bit, and you're like,
Yeah.
go home. Sometimes you got to send people home and tell them to go take their wife to dinner or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to maintain that family. Yeah, that's great. And I got to say, too, DEA agents, these guys are not doing white collar crime. They're the national police magazines you get at the police departments. I think they get mailed to every PD. The back always has fallen officers, and it's way too many DEA guys. It's like cops and DEA guys are getting shot. It seems like the most.
Yeah, and when I went to the academy, they said, somebody's going to be in this class is going to not make it to the end of their career. And you're young, you're like, okay, but
Won't be me.
our DEA wall of honor, by the time I retired, 3 of my good friends are on it. And so,
Jeez.
you do lose friends, and that's not even counting the people who, other things happened to, and they needed, help, or they didn't make it to the end of their career. They decided to do something else, or something drove them away, or they couldn't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Justin, I didn't ask you, if you notice above your head there, you have a Instagram and then an @ and then nothing. Do you have an Instagram account?
I do. It's JC King 8095.
JC King 8095.
Yes.
There we go. That look right?
Yes.
All right, sweet. Well, let me ask you, as a young special agent, can you remember the first time, the first hot call or first hot situation you got into?
So, it's a little different for agents. I will tell you a funny story. So when I was down in South Texas, I started on the border, and one of the guys in my group came to me and said, "Hey, you were in the military. You probably know how to help us with this problem." And essentially, task force had an informant who these guys were running drug loads from the border up to Houston. And what they would do is they would circumvent the Border Patrol checkpoints by going on these back roads. And down in South Texas, you ever been down there? There's so many oil fields that have been out there that you could essentially go.
Oh,
You
yeah.
could drive pretty much from the border all the way to Houston on back roads, and if you have keys. And so they would have these keys to these gates. And so we worked up a little plan, and I said, well, we're going to have to monitor these 3-4 gates, and we'll set up, and we put a airplane up, and so we could communicate with each other. And the case works out flawlessly the first day. It's hotter than all get out. It's, Laredo, Texas area.
Oh, yeah.
And
Bacon.
so we end up knocking off this guy. He's got like 400 or 500 pounds of weed in his truck, and we flip him and we take him back to the office and we flip him. And so we end up identifying the guy who he was working for. And it's literally, this is my first real warrant. And we go over to this little small town. The guy has a nice house, and we go over and we have to brief up our Corpus Christi office, send some guys out to help us. And I brief it and everything, and I'm thinking, oh, this is what I signed up to do, right?
Yeah.
And we go up to the door, and my partner, he's got the Ram, big guy, former Marine, and I'm like, hit it, and he goes, it's open, dude. And so he just reaches down, opens the door, and go in and flip that guy in the case. I worked off that case for 2 or 3 years. It was a fun case, but fast forward about a year or two, and I get another tip from somebody I flipped off the case, and I go to the Border Patrol has the BORTAC guys. That's their tactical unit.
Yeah.
And I go up, and this old former guy who actually had worked with DEA many years ago with our snowcap guys down in South America. And I told him, I said, hey, this is what they're doing. He said, well, hey, let's go out there. So we popped some sensors on the ground, and he calls me about a week later. He said, this is the night. We got to go lay in. We got to be there. And these knuckleheads, they would take like a truck, and they would take all the seats out of a 4-door pickup. They would put like 1,500 to 1,800 pounds of weed. They would have the whole truck loaded up.
Oh my gosh.
So we got a plan. I'm out there with a BORTAC team. I mean, it's like 10 o'clock at night, like clockwork. Here they come. And they get to the gate, and these kids are so fast that by the time we get out there and throw the spike strip out, they've already opened the gate and they're going. BORTAC's throwing flashbangs. They're trying to distract them, and they're laughing at us as they're driving off in this dually pickup. And they eventually crash it in. They would crash them out, and they run and everything. And so I found out real quick that you can have the best plan in the world, but, the bad guy gets a vote. And they would just roll on. And it was such a fun cat and mouse game.
Yeah, I bet, man. Sounds, and you in your wide open spaces too. You're not worried about civilians getting run over. It's game on.
Dude, these ranches would be like 10,000 acres. It would be like, and I knew the people who owned the ranch, and they would give us access, and they're like, yeah. But one of the things we found over time was, you could go out and do all that extra work, or you could just get the informant and give you the information. So over time, we kind of got ahead of the game. And, I literally did that for like 4 years, working those ranch cases. It was a blast. And the BORTAC guys and the Border Patrol, they were phenomenal. I mean, those guys are incredible.
It's amazing to me that, and obviously I'm a much different person than someone who would run drugs, but obviously I'm a cop, but the balls to run, you know what I mean? Just so these guys have to know you guys have all the tools, all their surveillance. It's not going to end well. It's like, I would just give up, but they just go. Is it just that they're young, or they're stupid, or both?
Well, I can tell you this. I think it's just a combination of things, but that group of guys, there was about 6 of them that they literally started when they were teenagers. They started doing that. And by the time I was working them, they were up close to 30. I mean, you're talking millions of pounds of weed they had run through their careers. And then they all got into it with each other, and they all had split off and had their own little groups. And I remember we were debriefing one of them. Actually, he was indicted out of Mississippi, and we're sitting there, and he started getting high on his own supply, and he got addicted to just smoking hydro. He wanted to smoke hydro all the time. And he was a little guy, and he was just started crying. And he goes, if I would have never started using my own stuff, and everything. He said, I didn't even use my stuff. That was skunk weed. He said, I bought the good stuff.
That's funny. Weed is not a very motivating drug. It kind of makes you a little bit sloppy.
Yes. And we're talking, close to 20 years ago. This guy's like, I was spending $1,000 a day smoking weed. And I'm just like, you're a freaking idiot, but that was their lifestyle.
Damn. Yeah, that's in too. You get, I think to this day, whether you agree with it or not, I think weed is still a Schedule 1 federal drug, right? Which is kind of crazy to think about. But when I was in police academy years ago, we had a drug interdiction guy come in, and he laid out a case for us, and it was kind of funny. To this day, I don't know why. I guess he just did it to make a point. But this guy was doing hydroponics, and he had figured out, he knew how much time he could do if he was busted by the state, Massachusetts. So he did the operation. He said, the risk is worth this, the squeeze or whatever you want to call it. So he did it for like 5 years. He made millions and millions, and he hit it well, according to this guy. And he got busted. He did like 2 years in jail. 2 years for millions and millions of dollars made. And I think now they care more about the tax revenue than they do the marijuana. They want the state wants their money, But he did that. And so the drug interdiction guy was kind of like, hey, can you blame the guy? I mean, he had nothing going on. He figured out how to grow weed. He was good at it. He figured out, well, if I'm careful with power consumption and everything else, by the time they figure it out, if they figure it out at all, I have a 5-year plan, like very industrious 5-year plan. It got busted in about 5 years, and he got out in 2 years, and the guy said basically we could never locate the proceeds, so guy's living high in the hog now. And I was like, damn, this is a funny thing to tell a bunch of new cops,
It is, and when you're working on the border and you respond to the Border Patrol checkpoints, and the way it worked down there was that ICE, Homeland Security, they would respond to the actual port of entry, and then checkpoints are a little bit inside. And so when the Border Patrol would seize drugs, and so twice a month I would be on duty, and so you have an office full of agents and task force officers that are responding, and it's nothing to get a 2,000, 3,000 pound load. The biggest load I ever responded to was 8,000 pounds. And, and so I had another load that was 6,000 pounds. And when you start to see just the volume, and that's not even talking about the cocaine, and then we started to see the rise of the meth coming through as the Mexican production of meth went up. So you would just see this, you had we always said you have the dope already, now you got to build a historical case down there, because you would have that, and you'd show up at the checkpoint, and, the Border Patrol guys would have already talked to them, dealt with them somewhat, and you kind of get a gauge. And, you learn over time. I learned really quick to go in, and our intake form is called a 202, DEA 202. And an old task force officer taught me, he said, just go in, talk to them, read them, go through the 202, you get all their information, and then slide in, hey, I got to read you your rights, and you read them their rights. And he even had it printed off in English and Spanish and have them sign that they got it. And I would almost always know, because the first thing somebody would be like, well, let me tell you what happened. And if somebody even started with their story, I knew they had it rehearsed, and then so you start to break them down. And, oh yeah, I got there late to the shipping company, and the trailer, they left it outside. And, the bill of lading was what it rolled up because they stuck it in the trailer, and you're like, yeah, that's not how legitimate everything. And you'd be like, well, when you'd finally get some of these guys to break, a lot of them, they would be like down at a strip club or something, and they would be approached or at the truck stop. And next thing you know, somebody talks them into coming back a week later or something. And, oh, you don't worry, you won't get caught. And, those drug dogs are pretty good.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm very naive with how this stuff works, especially in the federal side. So if the Border Patrol gets somebody just at a checkpoint, they get drugs, or if it's a big amount, would they bring charges themselves to the U.S. attorney, or would they always call the DEA?
Yeah, they would. The way the agreement is down there is DEA would response to the checkpoints, and then we would take that and intercept it. So they have their I-94, their intake form, everything they did. We take that, put it with the packet. We go down, we build the case. We take them to holding down there. Webb County Jail would be our holding facility, and then take them, start them through the federal process.
That makes sense, because you can't have Border Patrol guys tied up with a big, huge investigation when they're supposed to be at the border, right? So,
right,
yeah, bringing the pros.
Yeah, and then and one of the things that a lot of times it would be it would be everything from a cover load in a truck to a false compartment in a car, you name it. However, I mean, I even had a case where I rolled up and the guys are laughing as soon as I get there, and I'm like, they're like, I look at the weed and I'm like, it's skunk weed. It's just some nasty stuff. It's not even wrapped up like it should be, and it's some of it's burning. And I'm like, what the hell? And he said, oh yeah, the chick's boyfriend threw it in the car, in the under the hood of the car, and it was actually starting to burn. And so it's like they didn't even have to use. So we didn't need the dog. We could smell the damn stuff burning.
What a dumbass. That's fun. It reminds me of my buddies in college. They went to Jamaica, and they weren't like big potheads, but they would smoke pot. And they went to Jamaica at spring break, and it was like they literally. And of course, this is 25 years ago, but they went to a farm, a marijuana farm, and my buddy's like, "Hey, they just give you a trash bag, and it's like $20." He goes, "So we're sitting there on vacation for 10 days or a week or whatever it was, and like we're trying to smoke this weed, and we're just like, because they're like, and the access to it in the U.S. was still very legal everywhere." And they were trying to think, like, how can we bring it back? And then ultimately they decided, luckily they weren't too high to think that they could. But that's the kind of situation where someone gets their hands on 25 pounds of weed and they're like, I got to bring it with me. I got to.
They're gonna make sure they got that home.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
so the mass is such a mess now with the weed. It's whatever, but it's like we kind of stop, cops in general on the road kind of stopped messing with it when they started playing with the, medical marijuana thing. And then, because before you know it, you start bringing it in, like, like an ounce or whatever you got from a vehicle search. And like the courts treated it like a joke. Like no one's getting charges on this. So kind of like road cops just kind of started whatever, just taking it, throwing it out, not charging people, like not really. But now because of that, the problem with that, it's one of those slippery slopes. It's like, yeah, is weed that big a deal? I guess not. I don't know. I don't like it. But whatever. We got alcohol. Isn't that good enough? It's been around for thousands of years. It does the job. So now we have weed. And now what happens is you'll be out directing traffic or something on a road job, and like every 10th car smells like burning marijuana. People are literally driving around all the time smoking weed, and they have not given us the guys on the road any real tools to get an effective arrest on it. I mean, I've done DUI, the drug driving under the influence. We call it OUI, operating under influence, and then it's drug OUI, and you people will tell you I just smoked at home, or because they think it's no big deal too. They have no idea, and you're like, all right, well, you're under the influence of marijuana. I see this, and this, but all of our field sobriety is standardized for alcohol, so we can do it, and then we can do lack of conversion stuff, but we're not certified in it, so it will get down to like a negligent op or something right away, which is kind of like, if you get a cop who cares about his cases, it's kind of like, this is like a kick in the balls. And then what they recently did, Justin, is they took away DREs. So we have these guys we send to like Arizona to like study at maximum intake jails to do all the observations they need to do on all different drugs, and they get back here and they have more time to do. They have to go, if they get put on a list and like, hey, we got a DRE that's still finishing his apprenticeship. So if you get somebody, let them come and observe him in the booking room, right? A lot of work, a lot of money for a little town or a city to do. And now our courts are saying DREs are not good enough. They want a medical doctor. So there was only one guy I knew he was a part-time reserve officer, worked in the town next to us, who was also a medical doctor. And it was like, and what are you going to bug the hell out of this guy for the entire county? Get him to go to you're not going to get a doctor to come in unless you pay him some huge witness fee. It's like, it's like a total mess,
Yeah, and I think that if people really knew the motivation behind trying to legalize it and everything, it's all about people trying to make money. It's the
Yeah.
largest cash crop in the world.
Yep.
And I was told when I joined the academy, that they're going to try everything they can, and it's ironic that I live in Arkansas now, and a few years ago Arkansas passed a medical, and because they couldn't get it legalized just recreational. But as soon as they got that, the people who all were saying it needed to be medical, they wanted to get it recreational. So for years I've just said, if you're going to do that, the medical is a joke. If you really wanted to go that route, then go through the procedures that normal medication does, to have to be tested, to have to, go through it. And, you get a, blood pressure medicine I take, and it's got on that bottle, it tells you, the doctor, the dosage, when refill everything. There's none of that. So there's nothing medical. And the other thing about marijuana, I think this is something that really, really what people need to say is, what is the impact to our children and the availability of it? And we know that the human brain doesn't stop developing until around 25. And you're starting to see more and more evidence that shows a lot of these situations we have in our society, especially with some of our mass shooters and things, when they do the toxicology and things after the fact, is the substances they have in their body. And so there's a lot of contributing factors that, we wouldn't say it's okay for a kid to drink a fifth of whiskey, a week or something. Why do we say it's okay to do that? And I think that, because a small group of people are making a lot of money, they're really fooling people into doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just on a very anecdotal note, it kind of takes out when I was growing up anyways, kind of like the fun and the mystique of weed. It was like, oh, somebody's got a joint. You know what I mean? It was like it was forbidden paraphernalia. You know what I mean? Like, people would sneak around, be real careful with it and all this stuff. Like I said, I was never real big into it when I was a kid, but beer was always good enough. But it had that little thing to it, and because it was illegal, people were like super careful with it, and like parents who smoked it kept it locked up, and no one knew their parents smoked it until they were older, type of deal. So, like you said, now that it's wide open, it's like it's become this thing where it's like, oh, it's just weed. He's just smoking weed. Well, just another anecdotal observation from people in my life. Weed takes the balls off you. It takes your motivations away. I mean, I know people say that, but it's true. Like, a lot of people I know that are like my age that are still smoking a lot of dope. It's like they're just not motivated much. You know what I mean? They're just zapped.
It's so true. And one of my favorite movies, actually, I'm old enough to watched it at the drive-in theater, was Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And Spicoli, and his buddies, they're just stoners, right? All they want to do is surf and do that. But what you said is 100% right. And then what we're seeing, the rise of drug use, other drug use. Well, history will show that the correlation to acceptance of other drug use, the pills, and why the cartels put, fake pills that make them look like they're oxy or something. Now it's all of that's going to be tied together, and you're going to see that. I mean, I did it for 21 years. I saw it go from marijuana, cocaine, methamphetamine, and then into the pills, with people starting off with addiction to pharmaceutical pills, and then the cartels leveraging that and making the fake pills and putting fentanyl in them.
Damn, man. Yeah, it's a tough one. And when same as alcohol, if I'm in a 7-Eleven or Cumberland Farms up here, and I see somebody stumbling around drunk in their 40s, I'm like, what a loser. You know what I mean? I'm like, you can't do that at home. You're out here buying Cheetos, like, not even necessarily like a crumb bum, just like a normal dude like us, just like kind of drunk. Same with weed. When someone walks by me, their eyes are glazed over and they're kind of stumbly and they're like in their 40s, I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, what a loser. You're a loser.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, and that's the other thing is, not to get, real philosophical or something, but, what's that family dealing with? Do they have children? Is there something,
right.
So it really is. And that's one of the things that, doing what we do is upholding the law. And then whenever the lawmakers want to restrict what you can do or anything, that's tough. And I tell people right now that there's probably not a tougher job than law enforcement, and especially being a supervisor or executive in law enforcement now, trying to hold that line when you got so many outside influences that are, trying to tell you how you should do things. And I, like I said, I take my hat off to anybody who's doing it right now.
Absolutely. Justin, can you describe a strange or bizarre thing you dealt with on the job?
I thought about this when I saw some of the questions you might ask, and I tell you something that was funny is we got a tip. I was working in Oklahoma City, and one of the guys in the group that some dude was cooking meth in a storage unit, and we go out to the storage unit, and the guy's like, "Yeah, I'm just work here and everything." So he's like, "I really don't know if I can give you access." We didn't have a warrant, but the guy pulls up and he's like, "I'm the owner." And the guy you just described a while ago, that's like in his 40s, that's kind of just that dude, that
Yep.
was him. He shows up. And essentially, what we figured out was his parents were loaded, and he was a pain in the ass. And they finally decided, hey, we're going to buy the storage unit and let him run this storage, location, and maybe he'll get his life together. And he's driving like a Range Rover, and we're looking at him and everything, and just you got to picture like Chris Farley and Sammy Hagar mixed together, like this dude, and he's like got flip flops and shorts on, and so I asked him, I'm like, hey, these storage units, they'll have those round locks on them, those, and
Yep.
I said, why do you have different colors? And they go, well, if they have this color, it's like the silver one is the people who pay. If we put like a red one on there, somebody hadn't paid, so they can't. We take theirs off and put that on. And I said, well, what's the blue ones? And they're like, well, that's the owners. And there's like three of them, like right by the office, and it's outside and everything. And so we open up, and that's where people said the smell was coming from. And so we go and we open up. There was no meth. They weren't cooking anything. But we get to the third one, and my partner and I, unlock it. He unlocks it. We tell him to step back, and he opens it, and there's a car sitting in it. But the car has like no fenders on it. The doors are off and everything. And the guy starts putting his hands in his hands up on his head, and he's like, "That's my car." And we're like, "What?" He's like, "That's my car." And he starts jumping around, and he's like, "I don't know how it got in there." And we're like, "What? What?" And he was essentially doing an insurance scam. But the guy literally is jumping around. He's trying to convince us that he didn't know. He said, "I reported it stolen. I reported it stolen."
Oh
And
my
we're like,
gosh.
and he's standing there with like 10 cops standing around him. And he's like, "I don't know." It's like over the bin's been taken off of it and everything. And this guy is so stupid. He literally is trying to convince us that he didn't know how his car that would strip was in his storage unit that he had the key to. And I just walked away. I told the guy who got us that night, I was like, dude, it's time to go home. I mean,
Yeah.
you could deal with this guy.
He's like, guys, what are the chances my car gets stolen? The guy finds my storage unit and puts it back in there. This is crazy, right?
Dude, the stories you'd hear, and I have another quick one, which is we did a warrant. We were working a big investigation with another office, and we were doing a takedown. I always hated to do a takedown on a trigger, but anyway, they had to get their guy in custody, and we had to get our guy in custody. And as we were watching this guy, it was the craziest thing. It was an African American drug trafficker who was hid the drugs from a Mexican drug trafficker, but they was delivering on behalf of a Aryan Brotherhood organization running it out of a prison. And so it was just crazy. So we start following this guy in Oklahoma City around, and red flag after red flag. He's got a real intensive criminal history, had been in a shooting, had, done all this. So he has one of those apartments you go up and it splits off and it goes to both sides in this small landing, has his surveillance camera up. And so I just tell the guys, I'm like, we're not hitting that door. We're going to wait for him to come out. And, he's on doper time. So, it's like 10:30 in the morning and he still hadn't come out, and they're taking the case down all over. And I'm out there, I'm the supervisor. And finally he comes out about 10:30, 10:45 in the morning, holding his baby in his hands, like a
Ugh.
1-year-old kid. And the guys do a really good job. He comes around a corner and like two guys grab him and one guy takes the baby out of his arms. And we go up and hit the door, clear the house. Got some, couple of kilos of coke in there. And anyway, I hear him outside just screaming, and he's screaming. Like I said, that he was on that second floor and go down the stairs, and I go out there and he's like screaming, police brutality, police brutality. And he's sitting on the steps. And I'm like, and he's like, I want to talk to the MFer in charge. I want to know where he's at, and everything. And so I kind of go past him and I get eye level with him. I go down the steps and I look at him and I said, I'm here. And he goes, who the F are you? And I said, I'm the MF in charge. You wanted to talk to me.
Yeah.
And he goes, look at this, look at this. And so there was a county deputy there. And he's like, the county, they take me down there. They always beat me up and everything. I'll record this. And I kind of leaned in and looked at him and I said, I ain't the county, buddy. I said, I'm the DEA and this is federal. And he kind of backs up and he goes, sir, can we talk? And so I said, we take him back up in there and he starts puking all over himself. And I said, one of the guys pulls out, he goes, dude, he's got a vest. You know, he had a police vest and you know, ballistic and had a 9mm loaded in the diaper genie, like right by the door.
Oh, jeez.
And the guys would kind of, you know, they were like, boss, you know, we should have hit this 2 hours ago and been eating breakfast and everything. I said, hey, by the way, what were you doing up here this morning? He goes, oh, I've been standing here with that pistol, drawing it, waiting for somebody to hit the door.
Oh,
and
my gosh.
And I just turned around and walked out. And the guys were like, I said, you know, whenever the hair on the back of your neck stands up and you just go with your gut, you know, don't do it.
Damn, that's sketchy, man. Thank goodness he came out with the kid. He must have thought, they're not coming.
You know, I think he finally got up and wanted to go eat some breakfast because he damn sure wasn't going to cook anything or make anything for himself or his kid.
Isn't it funny? Bad guys sleep in. That's the same. Even when I was doing backgrounds over in L.A., they you always if you have a candidate in a bad neighborhood, you always go in like 8 a.m. because you get, you know what I mean? You never go at like afternoon because that's when I always like, you know how it is in bad neighborhoods. If you see like grown ass men on a Wednesday standing on street corners at like 1 p.m., they're not a good. You shouldn't go there. No, you know they should be at work. They should be doing something else.
You know, 100%. We always, like I said, call it doper time. You know, it's like, you know, we'd be out there and spend a lot of time in cars waiting on people to show up. You know, it just, you know, and then, you know, some of them it's because they're real cautious, but a lot of them it's just that they're just, you know, like I said, as you see a lot of that drug traffickers, like you said, that guy earlier had a lot of money and did a lot of things, but then you see a lot of them that they're upside down. And then when the Mexican cartels started fronting dope, and they're always upside down. So it's constant, you know, trying to get that money and everything. And we definitely saw, I mean, you still have huge cash seizures. You just had to find a different way to go about it.
It must be more challenging when the person's like sober minded. They get up early. You know what I mean? If they have a real business mindset and they're doing this drug thing, they got to be way harder to take down.
They are. And, you know, it's the ones who are, you know, they move up. They move up in the organization. And so, you know, it would be interesting. I was working these heroin guys years ago, and you know, I get the phone. I'm trying to figure out essentially they had a dispatch phone. People would call it, and the number would change like every 20 to 30 days, or if they thought they were compromised, they'd change the number. And so I'm trying to find where the guy's sitting, and so I, you know, get a court order or try to get a geolocation on it, and the damn thing comes back, it's in Las Vegas, and I'm like, I'm calling AT&T or whoever, and I'm like, this isn't right. Next month comes, I do it, same place in Las Vegas. So eventually, as the case breaks, we come to find out that, you know, I had the crew in Oklahoma City who's running, and they're just going. They get up about 8 in the morning. Customers call them. They meet them on a street. They would drive the car past them, and the customers would follow them down the street. They'd stop, run up, get the balloon of heroin, and got a little break. And I started flipping some people, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that guy right there." You know, I had the guys in Las Vegas identify the guy, and you know, they're like, "Oh, he used to be the driver here," you know, but he was that guy. It was a little bit more, so he moved up. Well, then had a guy in Phoenix that was the guy who coordinated all the drug loads, and he also brought in all the delivery drivers. And so, you know, it was pretty cool. Worked it up, got some indictments. I flew to Phoenix with a partner, and my other partner, he flies to Las Vegas, and at the same time, you know, we hit those guys, take them down while our crew is hitting the delivery drivers there in Oklahoma City. So the funny thing is they got the guy and my partner in Las Vegas, they got the dispatch phone. So when people started calling, they started answering it, and they would tell people, "Yeah, go to this so and so corner and everything." And so they arrested like 20 customers that day. It was all coming to get drugs. So it was a good day.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I guess moving up the chain it just takes a little bit longer to get you
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you're still going to have the knuckleheads at the bottom.
And those are the fun ones, the ones who think they're insulated when you catch them. And my favorite thing always was to go in and somebody would, to have enough evidence that somebody would be like, "Oh, don't you want to talk to me?" Like, "Nah, I don't need to talk to you. I got everything I need." And they're like, "What do you got?" And I was like, "You'll hear about it in court."
Yeah. They think they have the juice, so you got to deal with them.
Yeah.
Nope, negative. That's awesome. Justin, can you tell us about your most intense or terrifying situation you dealt with?
Well, there's a couple, but one I would probably say is so when I was on the fast unit, we were predominantly what we would do is go into Afghanistan and we would work with special operations forces, and we were going after the targets who were working funding the Taliban, the insurgency. And so a lot of times we would get to we would do operations that were always insert with aircraft. You'd have to go in, do your operation. It's like doing military. And so if you're working with a special forces unit or a SEAL team or Marines, MARSOC, those guys were all about it. And so just unbelievably professional, just war fighters, all of them. And so I think it was 2009. We're working with a group out of Kandahar, and they had come to us, and it was a straight up, perfect counterterrorism, counter narcotics mission into an area called Kajaki, and essentially the Taliban was controlling that area and tons of drugs. And so we go into that at night, insert. With mill aircraft. Actually flew in with Task Force 160 and got to do the full on, middle of the night. Everybody's under nods, and we go into this bazaar and we start hitting all this. Well, there was drugs there, but I mean, literally poppy fields all around, and so they're manufacturing heroin. But one of the things that was really interesting was as we got in there, they had taken the Afghan National Army truck that was there. They were driving around acting like they were the police, the Taliban were. And, we've got everything from, we're finding all their communication devices, their ICOM radios, weapons, everything. And so we had a secondary objective after we went through and this bazaar, you got a picture. It's like probably 20 storefronts, and they all have these clasp locks. And the SF engineers, what they had done was they put these little door poppers, and they were a little piece of a little popper. So you put it up there and you pull it. It was a short time freeze, like 10 seconds, and blow the locks off. And so we go through that. It's about 2 hours. We've been on the ground. Nothing's happening. And our secondary objective, we pull into like the middle of the town. There was a mosque, and part of the element was clearing our secondary objective, which was another bazaar, storefronts. And we hear one of the guys come on and say, "Hey, I got something." Essentially, what it was an IED facility. They were making IEDs, and full on, there's suicide vests in there. There's everything, and it's night. It's very quiet. Dogs barking here and there, but it's very quiet, except for what is flying around above us. And we hear the commander, the SF team leaders talking to the commander back at Kandahar, and it starts asking, manpower, how much you need to lock it down. So they start bringing in the outer perimeter a little bit, and essentially we knew then that it's going to be a gunfight the next day. And so, long story short is, the next day you start to see all the villagers leaving the village, and some of our guys go out and they're talking to some of the people that are still there, and the guys like, yeah, they're all leaving, and come back. And our interpreters, they all have these radios, so they're listening to the chatter on the radio, and they hear the interpreter. He's like, the guy says when they say Allah Akbar, it's going to start, and there was a wall there on the side of the mosque that earlier in the night my buddy and I had been leaned up against while we were listening to all this to happen. And it's just gotten early morning daylight, and he's like, They said Allah Akbar, and the whole side of that wall just machine gun just going up the side of it. And so that led into about an 8 hour firefight. The
Wow.
good thing was is that the SF team, one of the other teams out there, was in MRAPs with miniguns on them, and so and then our JTACs that were assigned, dropped about 8 bombs that day. So it turns into about a 9 hour firefight.
Jeez.
Did well, everything dropping mortars on us, everything. So just a
Did you
little
guys have
something
to get
different.
involved as agents? Were you guys shooting
Oh yeah,
back?
oh yeah. You're
Wow.
out there. You're out there. I mean, you're part of it, and we had trained with the special operations guys and lot, and we had our own selection program for that unit, and we mirrored it much like selection, and then we did all of our embedded training. So it was a 2 month training just to get through and get accepted onto the program and once you got there. So these guys knew us. We'd worked together, and so yeah, something unique that most agents don't get to do.
Damn. Yeah, you went to war. That's crazy, man. And you
Yeah.
guys had like like bombers at your disposal to hit the place, and
Well, we were attached to the special forces guys, and they had all that.
yeah,
So we're just at that point we would bring our Afghan law enforcement with us, and they would have their Afghan army guys with them that they train. So part of that process is to be out there to mentor them to do those operations as well. So we have our counterparts, and they were always about it. They're like, "Oh yeah, you guys bring some more Americans along, and you guys are you train with us." And so yeah,
so they
that's
were on
a
the level, the
unique.
Afghan forces. They weren't. You trusted them and everything as much as
Yeah,
you
so
could.
those were our those were our vetted police unit, and then the SF guys would have their vetted. They call them the commandos, the Afghan commandos that they worked with, and they were mentoring as well.
Wow, man. Imagine living in a country like that. We got like, I mean, because I'm sure there's plenty of crooked guys in the Afghan government working with Taliban and all that. But so there are legitimately government forces over there that are, they don't want the Taliban there either.
No, no, and unfortunately, what you see now is that a lot of those people they couldn't get out of there, and so the people who worked with the Americans, they're the ones who are at some of the most threatened
Oh, yeah.
population, and so yeah, it's a I don't even want to go there. It's a travesty.
Yeah, it's terrible, man. Well, it sounds like, well, thank goodness you made it out. Did you guys get any, was there anybody left to arrest or take into custody?
No, not on a day like that. It's you're having you're at an impasse there, and there were people that we arrested, worked up cases, and that was another part. The Americans were helping to build the judicial system in Afghanistan, so teaching
Sure.
them how to do investigations. So, but you couldn't do anything in Afghanistan without an action arm. Like you can't just drive up to a guy's house and throw handcuffs on him and take him. You always have to go into every operation like with full support. We have cut all your contingencies planned and have that coverage and without the military, I mean, we did do some things, early on, but as it got more violent and everything, you had to be so much more embedded with the military.
Yeah, I can imagine. Damn. Justin, in kind of a tougher question for some guys, but do you have a positive situation, heartwarming situation from your career?
You know, there's something that happened later on in my career, and unfortunately, whenever I got up to be a SAC, I had multiple states under me, multiple offices, and DEA started doing these drug summits, and what it was we brought in families who had lost loved ones to fentanyl, and that was something that really was an eye opener. And going through probably 18, 19 years of my career, I hadn't really looked at it from the victim side as much. But what I found was these people who had gone through this traumatic loss, but they just had this passion to help other people never go through that. And I tell you, I've said it to people. I said, the courage they display, the things that they would do, and how I saw them, band together to help each other, but to also educate people and say, is there try to get resources out there to stop with this. And I had arrested people in my career that came back later and said, "Hey, you saved my life. You got me out of that, or whatever." And that makes you feel good. And but I really think being around these people who every day they don't try to run from it. They try to help educate people. And it was so inspiring. And DEA does those, every year across the country. And I think that what we find is being more connected to that community really opened our eyes and helped us to be better.
Excellent. Yeah, absolutely. Um, a lot of people listening are on the fence or thinking about becoming law enforcement, cops, federal agents, all that good stuff. What piece of advice would you give them?
First off, I'd say that you're never going to work with a better group of people. And if you go to think about your career, you're going to spend so much of your time at work and so much time with these people. And it is a noble profession, and I think that you will not be disappointed. You'll love it. You're not going to get rich, but you're not going to starve. And I think that one of the things that I tell people when they come on is, master your craft. You have to learn. You got to learn to be a professional to do this. And I would tell an agent, our task force officer, when they come on board, I'd be like, your job is to be able to have an informant, get a target, work up a case, develop evidence that you can take and present and show that what crime they're doing, and then ultimately take that all the way through and bring that through fruition, all the way to the fact that they're sentenced. You close the case out, you destroy the evidence someday, all that. But you have to be able to do that, and that's like your one-on-one stuff, and I think that that's part of mastering, and take pride in it, and learn from your experiences, and every day try to be better than you were the day before.
Absolutely. Great words of wisdom. Thank you for that. Justin, let's talk about what you got going on now. I have your LinkedIn profile up on the screen. So what are you involved in?
So I was very fortunate. I work with the National Command and Staff College, and we provide leadership programs from all levels of leadership, from entry level. We train up to executive level, and what we try to do is bring more resources to create better leaders. One thing in the military, I was taught leadership over and over, but how much leadership training do we give to law enforcement? We put people in a position, and we don't give them that training. And so what we want to do through online and blended and in-person training is to do that. And we also want to make people stronger. So we teach through that. Our sciences, we call it great to Magnus. We say Magnus is better than great. And so we want people to be healthier, stronger leaders, and we have programs to do that. I just tell people, if you were interested, go to commandcollege.org and look us up.
Sounds great, man. Yeah, what we have going on, I notice in law enforcement, is there seems to be a gap. A lot of young people, and there's a lot of people my age, like 44 and older, and not a whole lot in between, which is something they're looking at in law enforcement for like leadership roles. So when I started coming up, like it would be normal for your sergeant to be like salt and pepper hair. He's been on the job a while, and then from his ranking up, generally older guys, a lot of wisdom, a lot of time on the job. Kind of a lot of maybe they were innately good leaders, or maybe they just got promoted because they were the oldest guy in patrol. But usually, the right person, would get the job, and they learned their leadership skills from picking and choosing supervisors they had, and kind of hodgepodge together how they wanted to be. And some people are just good at leadership, innately. They just get it. But this might
Yes.
be a really good thing for especially like Massachusetts, where we have this big age gap, where it's like a lot of guys,
100%.
they want to get out. They're older, and as a cop, you can get out earlier than other professions. But we have this whole huge hole where it's like, people are being made sergeant like late 20s, mid 20s, and there was always a 5-year standard for before you could even apply to be sergeant, let's say. And now it's like a lot of towns are superseding that, because it's like we got to have people in these roles.
So what you're describing is exactly the area that we're seeing, and we see that people are promoted more earlier with less experience, and we're seeing that gap and the wisdom. That there's a lot of people leaving law enforcement with all that natural ability. You said that they got that training, and a lot of it was on the job. And what we really feel that is important is to not be at a position where it has to be OJT. We want to identify those potential leaders early, and we want to start training them. And we feel that, I'll give you a good example. We have an emerging leaders online program, and that's something that somebody goes through, that they're learning leadership online, self-paced, and they're starting to develop it. And agencies need to be thinking like that: is how do I start to develop them? And then as they move up in the ranks, it's not enough to wait till somebody is a captain or a lieutenant and then say, "Oh, I'm going to get you on the wait list for this school." They're already been doing the job. And, we need to do that early. And I think that we need to change the mentality in the profession to be, what are we doing that next generation? And I think as higher I went up, the more I started to invest in the development of my leaders and say, how do I get them to a point to take my job someday? Because really, that's what it is. The organization is going to continue on after every one of us leaves.
Absolutely. Yeah, I see that on the higher levels, like maybe a chief grooming a deputy chief or a lieutenant. You know what I mean? Someone they've picked, but it doesn't happen much below that, which I think is what you're talking about, where the patrol is like the beating heart of a police department, police and sergeants. It would behoove them to pay a little bit more attention to senior patrolmen or guys who are being eyeballed for supervision, because those are going to be your future lieutenants and captains and whatever else.
Well, and I can tell you from sitting in the executive chair for a while, the higher you go up, the hard, you get more information, but you lose a lot of information.
Sure.
But ultimately, the one thing that I found is exactly what you said. Whenever the lowest, newest person in DEA and one of my 230 people across the 11 offices was DEA. And when they interacted with somebody, that's all they knew. They were DEA. They wouldn't remember their name, maybe not even their face, but DEA was there. And so if you take that in and look at patrol, that interaction every day with the public, that's what really, and who's supervising those people? Who's that person that's there? And then you said it earlier, all that other stress that you have. And when you become a leader, you start to have a whole lot of other factors, that are factored in. And leaders have families too. They have lives as well. And so we start to see that compression of stress get more and more and more on leaders as they go up and stuff. And so we want to really equip people earlier on to say, hey, this is normal. You got to look to your left and right, ask for help, but also, whenever people realize everything I say, it can be scrutinized. I have to be responsible. Oh, now my boss is asking me why, police officer so and so made this stop that the mayor's wife called me about. All those things start to build, and so we want to explain to people, hey, this is going to happen. This is how you're going to deal with it, and we want to make you stronger. Because if we make our leaders stronger, we make our department stronger, everybody's going to benefit.
Absolutely, yeah. It is tough too when you are. I see guys who come up and get a supervisory role, like the biggest thing in their minds is like, how do I keep the guys thinking I'm cool, but also do my job? You know what I mean? They're some guys worry about that, and other guys don't at all, and that's an equally big problem. But it's got to be somewhere in the middle where it's like you're gonna have to be a supervisor, and if they respect you, ultimately later they will think he was right, and I need to fix that.
What you just said is so true. And then you add to the fact the pressure that somebody has in our profession because you're in a fishbowl. And there's not a lot of professions where the boss has to go out and toe the line as well. The military, law enforcement, they do. And so if the boss shows up and is not switched on, is not the standard, and I would always tell people when they were talking about promoting, I said, do you want the title or you want the job? Because you just want to say you're a boss, that's not the reason to be a boss. You got to want to know the job, and you got to understand what the job entails. And I've encouraged people through the years, and I can just go back to my story years ago when I was enlisted before I was an officer in the military, and I was that typical, they call it the E4 mafia, which is the young guys that are like the ones who they're the pain in the butt in the Army. But essentially, I was talking, and one of my lieutenants was asking me if I was interested in becoming an officer and go to the green to gold program, is what the Army called it. And at the time, I was in Germany. I'm like, no, I'm not. And he goes, well, if you're going to always complain about your bosses, if you're not, he said, don't. You can be the solution, or you can be part of the problem. He said,
Right.
So choose who you're going to be. And it was a small conversation on the side of the road. I was walking back from the motor pool to the barracks, and it stuck with me. And you know what? It changed my mentality. And so, be the, I always say, be the leader that you want to work for.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Justin King, thank you so much for coming on, brother. It's an absolute honor to have you.
Well, thank you. It has been a pleasure. I really appreciate what you do, Steve.
Thank you, sir. And as far as links in the show notes go, I'll put them right at the top of the show notes. If you want your LinkedIn in there, the National Command College, I can put all those in there so people can easily get at you.
Thank you so much.
All right, brother. I'm going to do the outro. Can you hang on for a couple minutes? You got to run.
I will.
Awesome. The great Justin King, guys. What a fun conversation. Unbelievable. Imagining U.S. law enforcement having to be involved in a firefight in the Middle East is, wow. DEA can take you some crazy places, guys. Really, really cool. This is a time in the show where I thank the Patreon supporters, from Captain all the way down to Sergeant gets on the roll call for a shout out. So who I'm talking about is the great Jamin Jack, Captain Jamin Jack, Security 101. Check him out. Andy Biggs, the great and powerful Andy Biggs, lieutenant level. The great Lieutenant Tom Connell. Love you, buddy. Adam McMahon, Adam Mehall, the great Ben Peters, Brad Thompson, Dan Carlson from Burley Boards. Check him out on Instagram. Amazing woodworker. The great Chris June, the great Clark Luckoff, Dave Ellman, Dennis Carrasquillo, everybody. None other than Detective Nick Adams, ladies and gentlemen. Doug and Kelly Newman. Love you guys. See you at church. Dylan Mosher, everybody. The great Elliot Sykes, Gary Steiner, ladies and gentlemen. The great George Cariotis, everybody. Greg Gadboy, everyone. J.A. Family and Company, thank you. The great Jake Pinito, James Rose, everyone. The great Jason Labrie, Jason Lau, ladies and gentlemen. Jessica King, John Jordan, John Shoemaker, John and Aaron Kate. Love you guys. See you at church. Justin King, ladies and gentlemen. Kyle Roberts, the great Kyler Napier. Lauren Stimson, everybody. The handsome Lane Campbell. Lisa G, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Roach of Roach Machines. Check out his AI solutions. Iceman from Motor Cop Chronicles. Check him out. Great podcast. Nancy Hammond, the great past guest Paul Maloney. The handsome and venerable Raymond Arsenault, everybody. The great Richard Tolles. Keep on trucking, brothers. Stay safe out there. Sasha McNabb, Scott Young, Sean Clifford, the great Seth Wright, Sheriff Ronald Long, everybody. The great Tammy Walsh, holding it down at dispatch. Tony Fahey, William James Long, that's Deputy William James Long to you, thank you very much. Zach Haney, Zachary Pleat, and the great George Tessier. Love you, buddy. I will see you at church. Woo! The list is getting long, guys, and I truly appreciate that. If you really love the show, the link to Patreon for support is in the show notes. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week.